Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching. James doesn't let me say that.
No, it's
You
fine.
might not be watching in the morning with us.
It's been one of those mornings where we tried
Yes.
to record it. We've had the giggles, at least
James
I've
has
had the giggles.
And the sun was shining, and now it's not.
But that's okay.
Probably means you can see us better. So welcome to week 6 of the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Last week we had Kevin Rachel.
Yeah, talking on the rule of life.
That was fantastic.
Really great.
Yeah, it was really good.
Thanks for doing that, guys. And we are going to move on to the second part of the book this week, where we look at how we do this unhurrying thing. And if you haven't got a copy, we'd love to encourage you to get one.
How you doing? How was your week? Because we haven't spoken for 2 weeks, so...
We have spoken to each other.
Oh yeah,
Let's
we
just
have,
point
sorry.
that out because we're married. And we have had conversations. But about this particularly, with the unhurrying thing. Yeah, so I'm in an interesting point in life where our youngest has just gone to school full time, and so I suddenly have kind of lots of time in the day to choose what to do, because I work, but I can work the hours when I want to work them and then fit other things in. And so
yeah, because you've now had all 3 kids have...
Yeah, for the last 2 weeks I've been at school full time. So yeah, so it's been really interesting because in theory I have lots of time to feel unhurried, but of course your to-do list just goes exponential when you feel that you have time to do things. And so I have had days where I felt really peaceful and unhurried, and yet still got things done that I wanted to get done, and that's been really good. And then I've had other days where I felt really hurried as I've gone through the day. So yeah, so I'm having to sort of do quite a lot of reflection at the moment and say, well, what worked well on the days where I didn't feel hurried, and what wasn't good on the other days that did feel hurried, and just trying to learn from those experiences as well. How about you?
Me, the challenge has been not to travel at 1,000 miles an hour and then pull the handbrake on
at the weekend,
and then let it off on the Monday. So I've tried to slow my week down by doing different activities and then get to the end. And actually last Sabbath was really good.
Yeah.
So
just to say, Sabbath is one of the practices that we're going to look at in a few weeks.
Yeah. So it's been a bit more positive for me this week.
Fabulous. So, James, do you like reading biographies?
I do. I really enjoy looking at people's life and seeing what they did well, where they got things wrong, and then how that kind of challenged the way that they did the rest of their life.
Okay.
So recently I've been reading Eddie Jones's book, and he was commenting on the way that he coaches. And one of the things that I do is I'm a PE teacher by trade, and I love learning about how to be better at coaching kids in their sport. And so it's just really interesting. One of the quotes that I like copying quotes down from books, but one of the quotes that I got back from that was, in high performance coaching, the way that you make people feel will actually define how good your coaching is. So how I'm doing that, how I'm making people feel, how I'm making the kids feel in my teaching will help them grasp what is taking place. That's really
interesting, isn't it? And I haven't read any biographies for the last few years, but when I was a teenager and a young adult, I loved reading biographies of missionaries. And I remember my mum buying me some, and just really just being so inspired at their passion for Jesus and the risks that they took in a sense.
So name the 2 that you were talking about earlier, because you mentioned
Nests Above the Abyss by Isabel Kuhn, and The Street Children of Brazil, which was Sarah de Carvalho. I can't say how you spell that. But they just, those 2 particularly stick in my mind, that I just loved reading their experiences of Jesus, and that being so exciting and wanting that for my own life. So John Mark Comer says to us, this is really interesting, this whole idea of biographies, because actually the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, are biographies of Jesus.
Which is interesting because and then what he was saying was the fact that actually we should learn to look at the whole story, at the whole of Jesus' life. Whereas sometimes we tend to jump in and pick out a story, whether it's a parable or it's
or an event or a healing, and we look at those things on their own, which is still really good to do, but that we can miss the wood for the trees, because we're looking at the trees and we miss this whole idea of Jesus' yoke.
It's like when you're looking at somebody who's successful, you miss the drip of the things they're doing every single day.
Because their success is the accumulation of all of those small decisions that they make on a daily basis.
Just because we're human, we like to look at the end product.
Yeah, absolutely. We all want to go like, oh yeah, I want to be that, like the amazing footballer. But the kids forget that every single day the amazing footballer spent 3 hours kicking a ball against the wall to get as good as they are. And so the way that we read biographies is the way that we should often read the Gospels in the New Testament, because we're going to learn from them those incremental things that Jesus did, his practices, that enabled him to be, you know, who he was and to be unhurried and to be peaceful.
And Rachel last week was talking about this element of having a trellis. She had a trellis and she was growing up fine on that trellis.
So they were talking about it's a rule of life. It's a picture of the rule of life.
And that's kind of taken us to this whole thing of discipline. And I don't know how you think about that word. Or
spiritual disciplines.
And the thing with this spiritual disciplines is that almost takes away from the practical element of life. You know, we can think of disciplines as in reading a Bible, praying. You know, they're not necessarily. You wouldn't necessarily put rest in that, or slowing down in that. Yeah,
absolutely. And yet, John Mark Comer says, well, maybe if we talk about them as practices of Jesus, then it helps us to think, oh yeah, if you're practicing something, you're having a go at it, and it's like, well, what were the practices that Jesus did that we can emulate, like you would, you know, emulate the way that Eddie Jones coaches, but we want to emulate Jesus, and we want this thing that he calls the easy yoke. So how are we going to do that?
And it's an invitation, isn't it? The other thing that I find interesting is the fact that you can see it as, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, got to do that, but actually he doesn't do that at all. It's an invitation to come and join him. So no, he says, it's not like the whole thing about the apprentice, isn't it? It's joining him in that.
Yeah. You know? So he doesn't say, you know, go and have a quiet time every day. Jesus never tells us to do that. But we're going to look at it in a minute, but it was something that Jesus did, and he invited his followers, his disciples, or his apprentices to come and follow him. And they would have come and followed and seen how he did his life each day, and then emulated that. And that's what we're going to do too. So we're going to now just talk for a moment. Well, I've got another question for you. When you were a kid, did you ever say, I'm bored? Because I know I used to.
Do you know what? I
used to say it all the time.
I think when younger, there were lots, I was bored a lot, but not in the sense of where it was a bad thing. Whereas I think in our generation,
it's a bad thing when we say it.
Yeah. I mean, our kids often say, I'm bored.
Yeah.
And it's like,
we're not very sympathetic.
No, we just say but actually we say to them it's okay to be bored, because I think it's important for them to be bored, because in that boredom there is a place where
for creativity and for just quiet thought and new ideas and absolutely.
You said about Kezia this morning, didn't you? You were saying...
Yeah, so our youngest this morning came and said, Mummy, I want you to play with me. And I was making all the packed lunches, so I had to say to her, I'm really sorry, I can't play right now because I've got to make all the packed lunches. I said, you just, you know, go and find something to play with. And she came back a few minutes later and she'd got a peg and a pipe cleaner and a little packet of tissues that she was adamant she was taking to school this morning. And she'd like fixed them all together to make a little contraption so she could like hold the pipe cleaner and it held the tissues or something. And she's 4 and she'd gone away and come back and been really creative with things that she just found in the house. In that moment of boredom of not having anything to do, and that was really exciting. So I was like, if I just had given her something to do, she wouldn't have had that moment of creativity.
I think the other interesting thing about boredom is the fact that it causes you to be present in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what you guys are like when you're waiting in a queue. Yeah, you often get your phone out and you put it out and you make a deal and
every time.
So and I'm the same. You know, there's either the sport, usually what's happening in the rugby or what's going on in football, or is Aston Villa beating Liverpool,
or you've got a book on your Kindle app and you're reading that, and all of those things are not bad things to do. It's just that that whole kind of eliminating of those little moments of boredom can have the effect of making us not be present and see what's around us, or maybe hear God, or spend that moment in prayer. And so that adds to our hurry through the day, and it eliminates those little moments of rest, I suppose, of stopping and just being, noticing, and slowing our day down.
And that leads into actually where we're going, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we've kind of missed out boredom and those little moments of rest during the day. Is there a practice of Jesus that could help us with this hurrying and, you know, what is there?
Funny you should say that.
Really? So this is where we're going to move into the second half of the book now, where we're going to look, but very slowly, at 4 practices of Jesus. And the first one is
silence and solitude.
Silence.
So Jesus sees
slowly,
silence and
solitude.
And for me personally, as somebody who's quite active, it doesn't come naturally for me to sit still and be quiet. I mean, even when I started doing this, I had to do it with earphones on, with music
wasn't silent.
which wasn't silent, which I realised.
Yeah, and also, I actually find it easier sometimes when I'm walking. So it doesn't have to be sat still physically, because I find it really hard to sit still.
And there was also an element where, when you first started doing it, you found it a challenge because you didn't feel like you'd achieved, there wasn't the
tick off task oriented. So that can be quite challenging. But essentially, the idea of silence and solitude is to turn up and be, but to be on your own with God, and to be somewhere quiet, so there aren't distractions. I've sat down twice this week to just try and sit with God, and realised that the washing machine was on a spin cycle, and it wasn't quiet at all, even though there was nobody else in the house. So that was quite distracting and also entertaining at the same time. But it's just to sit and to be quiet with God. But did Jesus do this?
Yes, he did, and he did. There's a lot of bits. If you follow his
loads. When you really start to read
through the Gospels.
Yeah, when you start to read it as biography, you see so many times where Jesus comes away from the crowd, or away from his disciples, to pray, to be with God.
So one of the examples John Mark Coleman gives is the time when, after he's baptized, he goes into the desert.
Yeah.
The Spirit takes him into the desert, and he's in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, when I've read that, I've been in awe of the fact that actually he's gone through those 40 days.
Yeah, it's amazing. An endurance test. It's like, man, I can do that. Like, Jesus totally was supernatural, because he could endure this 40 days in the desert, and then at the end, still somehow have the strength to refuse temptation of Satan. But do you want to say? Yeah.
So, but the way that John Mark sees it, or the way that he describes it, actually, it's the power of the silence and the solitude,
and the time with God,
that actually gives him he ends up with the strength to deal with the situation at the end with the devil. So,
and it was actually that he needed the 40 days with his Father in the silence and the solitude, and that's the effect of spending all that time quietly with his Father God, was what enabled him.
And he does that throughout the rest of the story, or the rest of his life, is that you'll see pockets of where he comes out and moves himself away from the rest of the crowd and takes time out.
I think often we see kind of rest or quiet as like, it's like what a busy day I've had, I just want to sit quietly. I just would like it all to be quiet. That's often the case of all the events. But actually, Jesus does it before everything. It's the build-up of strength. It's the receiving from God everything that he needs to go into his day, to go into his ministry. And it's just a totally different way of looking at it. So there are lots of other examples in the book. If you've got that chapter, you can have a read, or have a look at our Connect Group resources for this week, where we're also going to put a very short description of the practice of silence and solitude that we'd love you to have a go at this week. So each week from now on, there's going to be something to have a go at. So we've got to the practical bit, we've done all the theory, we've looked at why and everything else. But each week now we're going to have something to practice, and we'd love you to have a go. Just start with really small goals. If it's a minute, that's great. If it's 2 minutes, if it's 10 minutes, fab, whatever works for you. But we would really love you to have a go. And this week, it's this very simple breath prayer. So the idea is to be somewhere on your own, be somewhere quiet, or have it quiet, so no music playing, not the washing machine or the spin cycle if you find that distracting. And to invite God and to say, God, come and be with me. I want to know your presence. Just come and be with me, please, Lord.
And then choose a phrase or two phrases that you can repeat
as you breathe.
So an easy one would be, you breathe in and go, Jesus, you're here, and I'm with you.
Yeah, and then to repeat it over and over again, and to really focus on your breathing and being present, and to acknowledge God's presence with you, and just not to ask him lots of things, not necessarily to pray about stuff, not to try and listen, but just to be with God. So I literally started with 2 minutes, and we're going to talk in the next couple of weeks about some of the things that we find hard about doing that. But it's just really great just to give it a go, and we'd love you to talk about that in your Connect groups this week, when you've had a little go, about your experience of it. And there's no guilt over this. There's no shame if you decided, realised that you were suddenly making your shopping list in your head while you were trying to do it. We've all been there, and still are many days. But just to have a go and to just say, yes, Jesus, this practice of yours can have something to teach me about unhurrying and eliminating hurry. So enjoy. We hope you get to have a little go at that this week. We'd love to hear how you get on, and we will be back. Well, we won't be back, but
we've got someone else coming next week.
Someone else coming from a church next week to talk to you about the next bit, and we're really looking forward to seeing you again.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye. Hi guys, it's so good to have you this morning, whether it be on Facebook or on Zoom. We are Hemel Vineyard Church, and we're just doing life together as we follow Jesus. If you want to be part of that journey, then feel free to come and join us, whether it be on Zoom, again on Facebook next week, or drop us a line and have a conversation with us. We'd love to hear from you. Another place you can find out what's going on would be to check out our website, which is www.hemelvineyard.org.uk. I pray this week that you would know Jesus' love and his presence with you in whatever you face. See you next week. Bye.